Good morning and welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Marcus Street in Corning. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We will be talking about the arraignment of the former president. It was wall-to-wall coverage. If you were tuning in certain networks to see your stories or your game shows, they were interrupted by the wall-to-wall coverage of the court hearing with the former president, as you are aware. And by the way, before we get into the nitty-gritty of it, if you'd like to weigh in on yesterday's court case or just any of the issues we talked about in general, that is the best way to contact me. And thank you to everybody who have been contacting me throughout the, just about, I think officially 3 months on the air. So thank you. Please continue to reach out. So as I said, yesterday was the day that everybody was talking about. Trump pleads not guilty to federal charges that he illegally kept classified documents. He did not speak. It was through his lawyer. And he was in campaign mode too, wasn't he, after the fact? Going to, throughout Miami, he went to a iconic Cuban spot in the city's Little Havana neighborhood. Stopping at a little restaurant there. Supporters serenaded him. Today, according to this piece, is Trump's 77th birthday. So a little early, they sang him happy birthday. I guess that happened at a couple of different events that he was at because he gave a speech, of course. We're going to take a pretty good look into this, but I'm not going to spend the whole program talking about it. I hope you don't mind. As I said, it's been wall-to-wall coverage. So we'll talk about some of the takeaways, but not necessarily some of the minutia that you're seeing on various outlets or maybe online. I do want to mention a little bit later on in the program, we're going to be talking to Maggie Hall from Big Fox News at 10. She does a great job, and we haven't had her on the program yet, so I thought we'd talk a little bit about the news, and I do actually have a little bit about the media as well in regards to, and the news coverage when it comes to this historic court appearance. So we're going to talk about that in just a little bit. We do have the CNN takeaways. I like to look at those because CNN obviously coming in with a slant, with a bias. So what they thought of the historic, again, that's going to be the term thrown around a lot, the historic court appearance. Well, let's start with that. Why don't we? We have a little bit of time here. So first of all, the takeaways from CNN. This is the headline. Takeaway from Trump's historic court appearance. The first thing is a historic moment. So if you're not seeing a trend there, historic will continue to come up throughout most of the coverage. I guess probably the real, I guess you could say, drama in yesterday's appearance was that Trump can have no contact with the witnesses. There's some back and forth on that. I understand. Goodman, the magistrate, Jonathan Goodman, noted that this was a typical restriction in cases filed in the Southern District of Florida, where the indictment against Trump was brought, of course. Suggested that prosecutors put together a list of witnesses and victims in the case, and that Trump avoid communicating with them as the case moved forward. So that was probably the only, there's Maggie now. That was probably the only takeaway, big takeaway, from yesterday. But again, this was all because there was no media coverage of it inside the courtroom. A lot of it was after the fact. There's a piece that I want to talk about, if we have a chance, a piece I want to talk about in just a little bit, that CNN highlighted how they got the scoop without being able to use technology, how they got the scoop to run out and cover the fact that Trump pleaded not guilty. I don't think, was that a surprise? Is that really a scoop? But CNN believes so, and they put it into a 3-page document to pat themselves on the back. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. No major incidents during the protests. We talked about that yesterday, that they were, I think, padding the numbers, saying, well, you could see 50,000 people protesting. I don't think anybody expected that, but there was an anti-Trump type person that was dressed up to try to get in front of the motorcade. There was a little bit of scuffle there. And then, like I said, Trump went back into campaign mode, always in campaign mode, and went to the Cuban restaurant and saying on social media, "Thank you, Miami, such a warm welcome on such a sad day for our country." So now the case gets turned over to Judge Cannon. That's where we're at with the quick takeaways from yesterday. We've got to take a short break. Stay with us. Again, you can weigh in on that or any of the topics we'll be discussing this morning, or if you have any questions for Maggie Hall, right there is our hotline. So contact us there. All right. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. Please stay with us. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. Joining me in the studio this morning, Maggie Hall. Well, joining me in the studio, you work here.
I do.
You could join here anytime you want.
Exactly.
Maggie Hall's on Big Fox News at 10. I'm so glad you could finally be on the program. We had your now since retired fellow news person, Josh Feldberg, on him once before, and we miss him, of course.
Absolutely.
But I want to talk about you. So tell us a little bit about your background and why you decided to get into news.
Yeah, of course. So I actually grew up here in Corning. I went to SUNY Geneseo, and
cool.
I graduated with a bachelor's in English literature, and then I have a minor in communications, interpersonal, personal, and professional. And I never actually planned to go into news, but I was working over at the high school for a little bit, and I wanted to try something new. And so I was just looking for jobs in the area. It was my mom, actually, who sent me this job listing.
Oh, that's good.
And
she wanted you to stay close.
She was like, hey, I think you'd be like really good at this. Yeah, and I'm sure she wanted me to stay close. And so I applied, and I love to write. I love to meet people, interview them, and talk to them. And it's just been, even though I didn't plan to go into news, it's been so cool getting to know the community that raised me as an adult and being able to help people tell their stories.
And I think that's the best part. I know you and I have talked off the air about this. Getting to know people, I think that's the difference when you see some people that when they do an interview or are questioning somebody for the news, they're not listening to what the person's saying, right? But if you really sit down and have a conversation with people, you learn so much about our community or just about the person.
Absolutely. I think it's all about the people. They're the ones telling the stories, you know, like I'm just kind of a vessel that helps like curate that story to put it on the air. And so that is my favorite part of the job. I love getting to know people. I love meeting new and different people every single day throughout our community. So
you said this wasn't originally your intention to get into news. Was there a learning curve when you got in?
Absolutely. I definitely think it was a little bit of a trial by fire, especially because, so I'm a multimedia journalist, which means I work with the camera. So I shoot my footage. I do all of my interviews myself. And then when I get back to the news studio, I edit everything together, which is a really cool level of creative control that I absolutely appreciate. And I was definitely very nervous going into it, and it definitely like took me a second, but I love to learn on my feet, and I'm a quick learner. So
what I like about you being able to edit your own news, you know what's important after you do something, right? I think when you have other outside influences editing, it can change the whole concept of the story.
Absolutely, yeah. So I can really like show when I'm speaking, you know, like I know my voiceover, so then like I know what I want to put on screen when I say certain words. I know when I'm doing interviews, you know, I'm listening to the person, I'm actively there. But then also, like, I hear the sound bites when I'm talking to them. So I know what sort of thing I want to put in my segment. And so that's really cool to be able to go back and look at all of the hard work that I've put in that day, and then be able to edit it down and make a little segment.
When you talk to people in your daily life, do you still hear sound bites?
Yes. Yes, probably. Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Now, when you start your day off in the morning, how do you pick your stories?
So I think I do what we call news gathering, which I'm sure you know. So I have a lot of local sources that I'll chat with. A big thing is actually social media. So I'm a part of a bunch of different, if you were to go into like certain Facebook groups, Chemung County, Steuben County, I'm in there, you know. I'm looking at different things. Then of course we got to check out the competition as well, see if there's any stories that they've broken that we haven't yet. And it's really just, you know, checking your email, talking to your sources, really using the network that you've curated for yourself.
So is that your typical day? Is really just coming up with a story for the day?
Yeah, and I love that aspect that I get to pick my stories. You know, I mean, I have my news director, I have my producers, they weigh in and everything like that. But I feel like also being from here, I know partially like what is important to the community,
Yeah.
you know, what people may
Of
want to
course.
hear about, that sort of thing. And so it's an honor to be able to like go through and like pick what will be presented on that night's news.
And that's a really good point. And it's not to knock anybody else, but if you're new to a community, there's so many little aspects to a community you may not be aware of. I remember years ago, I was watching, I don't remember what network, and they were talking about Amo Houghton and called him Amo Houghton. And I thought, boy, that's such a local, you know, but that's got to be tough for someone. But what you have is the upper hand from being here. So you know the language, you know
Yeah.
the people. So it's kind of interesting. Can you stay with us through the break? I already have to take a break.
Absolutely.
All right, we'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. We're being joined by Maggie Hall this morning from Big Fox News at 10. Maggie was joking if I ate any of our ice cream and all of our Mars food. Don't forget Stars on Mars on Monday at 8. It's actually not that bad.
Really?
The show and the freeze dry.
I saw a commercial for the show, and I
doing
was
really
very
well.
interested. I was
Yeah.
like, this looks really like very fun.
Yeah, it's doing really well in the ratings too. So we were talking about the news. How do you keep your passion every day to do the news? Because sometimes news isn't always very positive.
Yeah, I think it's definitely, you know, finding ways to compartmentalize, keeping my you know, work life and home life separate, which is hard because like I wake up in the mornings and I'm immediately like looking for a story.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I'm trying to at night when I'm having dinner, you know, like I'm texting somebody or I'm calling somebody to set up my interviews for the next day. So I think it's really important to like take time for myself. So like
you have to.
whether that be like working out or you know, just, you know, taking a bubble bath
Yeah,
or like something
anything,
like that.
yeah.
Really just finding those times to really just like recenter myself and like recognize that what I'm doing is definitely like a mentally draining job sometimes. And like you said, like some of it can be very heavy. So I think it's also recognizing on those heavy days when I maybe want to give myself a little extra self-care, extra, you know, recentering. I might like meditate or something like that.
Well, I know that I used to say it on the radio show a lot too. The weekends, I would not pay attention to politics. That was like you had to have those 2 days, and you know, which is unfortunate because you miss all the Sunday shows. But sometimes you just have to take that step back. Same with news, right? Because you're probably even on the weekend saying, "Oh, darn it, that would have been a great story if this would have happened Tuesday." Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, what are your goals? Do you want to stay in the news business?
I'm not sure yet. I know that I really want to stay in a role that sort of like serves my community, serves the people around me.
Sure.
I would love to maybe not be on camera every day.
A lot of pressure.
Yeah. Putting on a full face of makeup is like, oh my goodness. But for right now, I absolutely love it. I love our station here. I love the folks here. And I think this has just been the coolest opportunity that I never would have expected for myself.
Do you watch the news, like not the local news necessarily, but the national news and kind of judge it?
A little bit, yeah. Like there's times where, and I mean, I can't really like turn it off. You know, like I'll go over and like have dinner at my parents, and my dad will be watching the national news, and I'll kind of like in my head be like critiquing. I'm like, oh, like they should have like used like a nap pop, or like they should have like cut away from that, or like used a different soundbite, like that sort of thing. But it's definitely not like an intentional, conscious thought process. It's just like my day is just so saturated with it, so like I end up taking it where I go.
Yeah. Have you had through your time? How long have you been here?
I've been here over a year now.
Oh, that's great. Do you have a favorite story?
Ooh,
That's always tough because it almost is day to day.
Yeah. I think one of my favorite stories that I've worked on, or two of them actually, is I've worked on 2 crime stories.
Okay.
So I worked on one where I sat down with Monica Button, the mother of Nico Lisi, who was a young man who went missing from Addison. And I'm actually from Addison. Monica went to school with my parents, knows them very well. And so it was really fascinating sitting down and talking with her about her son. And, you know, it's still an ongoing case. And then I did another one about Edward Kint, who was released from Elmira Correctional Facility. You know, just analyzing the justice system and seeing how victims have been impacted, but then also seeing like how closure and like how justice has been brought to them has been really fascinating. And then I occasionally do Pet of the Week segments, and those are a little lighter, a bit more fun. I get to cuddle with puppies and cats and everything, so those are great too.
If someone's thinking about getting in the media and they're watching this, do you have any tips for them?
I think it's really look at how you talk to people. You know, you want to learn more about them. How you ask questions is huge, and just being an active listener. I would highly recommend, if you do want to get into media and you're still in college, adding on a communication major or minor, or even a journalism. My old coworker Josh Feldberg, who also went to student Geneseo actually, he was in the journalism major, and I think that really benefited him, and in the end also benefited me, because there were certain things that he knew that I didn't quite know that he was able to help me out with that. And then with the communication side, being able to curate how you speak to people, being able to present yourself in a professional manner, you know, no matter what, and be able to be a kind of chameleon, I think can really add to the job, because you're in different situations every single day.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is to know the subject too. Do you ever see a report where someone you can tell has no idea what they're actually talking about?
Absolutely. I think one of my biggest things, and we've talked about this, is when someone is doing like a serious topic and they're smiling. We're like, oh my goodness. I'm like, stop. And I will say, like, that was something, my first story I ever did, like, that was something I you know, and I was just so excited about the story and like the good work I did, and it was a serious topic that one of our coworkers here was like, hey, like,
tap it down a little
smile.
bit.
But
it's tough.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that's one of the big things.
Because I notice a lot, even when, especially on the political side of things, people will be talking about something and the facts, the who, what, when, where, and why isn't accurate, and you're going, that's got to be your number one job.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like it is by definition, right?
Absolutely. I think the first thing is making sure you have the information and the subject accurate, and then making sure that the way in which and like the channel with which you're speaking about them is appropriate is huge.
So Maggie Hall's our guest. Just before we go, are you excited about the Cardboard Boat Regatta?
I am. I'm so excited. I had so much fun last year.
That'd be one of your first gigs, wasn't it?
It was. It was. So I my very first day when I came to the news station, I sat down in like a sales meeting, out of all things.
Yeah, of course. Why not?
Because our old general manager, Terry, wanted me there. And he pointed to me. He was like, hey, like, I want you to do the interviews for the Cardboard Boat Regatta. And I was like, what is that? Like,
what is any of this?
I had no idea what it was. But I'll be out there. I'll be doing the interviews. Cool. So that'll be so much fun. And I love just seeing all the different boats people have, all of the crazy costumes and cool ideas.
They must put so much work in those cardboard boats.
I can't even imagine. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be like a part-time job for some of these people. And I know we're going to have the coverage about a week after. I think it's normally the Saturday after. So I'll be in the studio. You're going to be out there having the fun part of the job.
I am.
You get to interview everybody. So Maggie Hall has been our guest. You're doing a great job on Big Fox News at 10, and I hope that everybody will start, or they already are, start tuning in. Keep tuning in, I meant to say.
Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Maggie. Thanks for being on the program. Thanks for getting up so early for me.
Oh, my gosh, anytime.
All right, we'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. We are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Thanks again to Maggie Hall for being on the program. Big Fox News at 10, they do a great job. If you haven't had the opportunity to tune in, I highly recommend it. So we're talking about the federal indictment of the former president, Trump. Obviously not very happy about it. If you saw his speech last night. By the way, just as a side note, I'm always fascinated by the court sketches. I think I mentioned it yesterday. Did you see this one? Yikes. I don't know. Does that look like the former president to you? I don't. Anyway, so this was the big story yesterday. Please feel free to contact me with your thoughts on it. The former president said, today we witnessed the most evil and heinous abuse of power in the history of our country. Very sad thing to watch. This was at the golf club in New Jersey where he spoke. A corrupt sitting president had his top political opponent arrested on fake and fabricated charges of which he and numerous other presidents would be guilty right in the middle of a presidential election in which he's losing very badly, meaning Biden, of course. Now, I do think, without diving too much into this, I'm going to give you all the sides that we can find and weighing in on it, because there's a lot of people that have opinions on it. But I do think, as I said before, the timing of this, and also when you see whether it's Hunter Biden or some of the questions about the classified documents that Biden had and Pence had, it does raise concerns. And there's a piece from, I can't remember who did it. I don't think they learned from what they were reporting on. What I mean is they kind of had the crux of the argument, but couldn't quite get to the bottom of it. It's at MSN, but it's in the MAGA mirror. Trump's legal peril looks like a personal threat. And what the thought behind this is, and I do believe there's a point to it, people don't, and President Trump is very good at highlighting this. He'll say, this isn't about me, this is about you. And people take that to heart, that they feel, because so many things change so quickly, they feel that when you have the DOJ and others going after Trump, they're going to eventually go after you for whatever that issue may be, whether it's maybe guns, your religion. And that's what this whole piece, and it is an interesting piece. Again, I don't think they really get to the heart of the argument or to maybe understand why this is. But the one person they interviewed said, do you have millions of dollars to hire the lawyers he has? No. So they can bring any charges against you. They're coming for you next, said Laura Loomer, the activist. You know the name Laura Loomer. So this plays into that narrative, and the timing plays in the narrative that Trump is, and this is something he's going to continue to push, being attacked by the deep state, being attacked by the swamp because they don't like an outsider. Now, this, you don't have to agree with what I'm saying. This is just what Trump supporters are seeing. This is why his poll numbers have continued to increase. And I think, it was former Congressman Joe Sempolinski who joined us last week, that he said there may be people out there that don't like Trump, but they dislike the deep state even more. And that, I think, was a very good point from the former congressman. So Donald Trump said this is called election interference and yet another attempt to rig and steal a presidential election. More importantly, it's a political persecution, like something straight out of a fascist or communist nation. This day will go down in infamy, and Joe Biden will forever be remembered as not only the most corrupt president in history, but perhaps even more importantly, the president who, together with a band of his closet thugs, misfits, and Marxists, tried to destroy American democracy. Now, before, I'm not going to give all of Trump's speech. I don't want you to think that. I'm just going through some of the quick sound bites, if you will. He called Jack Smith a deranged thug, a raging lunatic. You've seen all this. But I do want to take a look at what some of his opponents said, some of his critics have said, because I'm trying to give you all sides of this to better understand what we're dealing with as a country. Because I do think it has implications outside of just this wall-to-wall news coverage. I think when you see what it means when our friends and foes throughout the world are looking at this, and you think of other political, maybe quote-unquote outsiders in the political world, what they're seeing when they see all of this hoopla. And Trump did receive quite a welcome coming from the New York Post here. He went to the golf club where he gave kind of a rally speech. They sang him happy birthday as well. So first when he went to that small restaurant, and now because today is his 77th birthday, he said, "Nice birthday, isn't it?" They were saying happy birthday. I was with Eric and Laura and the kids. "Happy birthday, Grandpa." And I said, "Oh, great. Just got charged with, they went for 400 years approximately in prison." Yeah, I mean, that's what he is potentially looking at. We saw Jonathan Turley yesterday saying that even if one of these stick, it could be a life sentence at the age of 77. So what do you think when you see this, whether it's the timing, you see you can see the political nature. I think there's a lot of people gloating over this. I think when you see Hillary Clinton trying to market off of it by selling those hats to say, what about her emails? Or you see Hillary Clinton kind of laughing about it yesterday at some forum. That's the kind of stuff that outrages the quote-unquote forgotten men and women that we've talked so often about, that we haven't, that the former president used to talk about at his rallies. Though that's the kind of thing that looks like a double standard. And I think Marco Rubio, was it Marco Rubio? Who was it? I don't think it was Rubio. We talked about it yesterday that highlighted that there's, it was Lindsey Graham that has that double standard there, where Hillary Clinton not only had some questionable things, obviously, with the email server, but also got away with what some deemed to be a major issue, and then laughs about it and gloats about it. Now, I guess that's the nature of politics, just like it is sports. There's a lot of gloating, but sometimes issues are a little too serious, and that's one of the aspects I don't think the media quite understand when they're trying to get inside the head. Is that one article said, look in the mirror of the MAGA mirror. I don't think they quite fully understand. I do want to highlight yet again, we're not just going to talk about Trump all morning long, but of course this is the big story of the day, and we have to highlight as much of it as we can. So the rivals, as critics, a lot of people weighing in on this, as I mentioned, not just the former president. Former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley, an opponent. She's running, as you know, for president as well. She said, if this indictment is true, if what it says is actually the case, President Trump was entirely reckless with our national security. Haley, obviously a candidate, added that the documents could have put all our military men and women in danger. Now, Marco Rubio had a point on that yesterday, that there doesn't seem to be any indication in all of this that there was any damage done. That yes, there's questions of why he kept the documents or why they're there, and we can get into all that, but the crime doesn't seem to fit the punishment of up to 400 years. U.S. Senator Tim Scott, who's also running for president, said during a campaign stop in his home state that the allegations against Trump were a serious case with serious allegations. And we heard earlier this week from Bill Barr, or as I guess it may be late last week, from Bill Barr saying it's very damning. Alina Habba, Trump's spokesperson, told reporters outside the courthouse that the decision to pursue charges against Trump while turning a blind eye against others, and that is going to be something we hear a lot from the Trump campaign and the Trump spokespeople, is the type of thing you see in dictatorships like Cuba and Venezuela. It is commonplace there for rival candidates to be prosecuted, persecuted, and put into jail. What is being done to President Trump should terrify all citizens of this country. These are not the ideals that our democracy was founded on. This is not our America. And again, I mentioned this just a second ago, but Marco Rubio, again, saying the indictment far outweighs the damage, if any, from what they allege in the indictment. The pressure is going to be extraordinary. So yes, the future implications, we can talk about that. What this means for, you don't want to see this become a trend of former presidents being arrested. Is not something typical of. This is the first time, right, of being indicted. A former president indicted. So again, I know I keep saying I'm not going to talk about this the whole time, but there's so much to dive into. I feel like I'm rushing around. Contact me. I'd love to hear your thoughts on yesterday. Any other topics you'd like to hear me discuss. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, please stay with us. We are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio on Marcus Street. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We're talking all things former President Trump, but we are going to get away from that topic in a little bit. First, his former vice president, Mike Pence, who's also a candidate for president, says he can't defend the allegations in the Trump indictment. Having read the indictment, these are very serious allegations, and I can't defend what is alleged. But the president is entitled to his day in court. He's entitled to bring a defense, and I want to reserve judgment until he has the opportunity to respond. Now, I want to go back to what Marco Rubio had to say. He's saying that kind of the punishment doesn't fit the crime. That, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I wonder what your thought on this is. That you deem what he did was wrong. You shouldn't have had those documents. But there's no alleged problems caused by that. Now, does that justify 400 plus years? I think that's a fair question, only because of what this does for really national security, and again, dividing this country even further at a time when there is so much division. But then you've got like Mike Pence and others. I don't think it was Pence who actually said it. I don't want to put words in his mouth either, but that said that, there's a justice system and justice needs to be served. Yeah, it wasn't Pence who said that. But even the inadvertent release of that kind of information could compromise our national security and the safety of our armed forces. Again, this is Mike Pence. And frankly, having 2 members of our immediate family serving in the armed forces of the United States, I will never diminish the importance of protecting our nation's secrets. So listen, he's running for president too. So a lot of these responses are very campaign-like. Now, AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, said what is detailed in Trump's indictment completely indefensible. And I'm giving you all sides, so I want to hear from you. I do think that what is happening now is also layered in a bubbling political tension in what is happening in the House. Right now, some of the House's most staunch extremists. See, this is, again, I find this all fascinating because, at a time where people say we've got to heal the divide, we've got to come together, and then we use terms like staunch extremists. You have scenarios like was playing out with the former president that just divides us further and further. Who are also some of Trump's most loyalist members of the House, have also ground legislation to a halt. Interesting that she's comparing the two. It seems to have been made very clear, and they have sent a direct message to Speaker McCarthy that McCarthy's either going to follow their orders or they're going to shut this whole place down. So she's somehow tying in Trump's case. Oh, okay, anyway. I think we've heard enough here because she then goes after Clarence Thomas, Brett Kavanaugh, the normal kind of talking points from AOC. This is what cuts at the core of the case. I believe the American people are going to have to decide if this is something that we are going to accept. So really all sides now questioning the system. And there's a very good piece on that I'm going to talk about in a moment, but we do have to take a short break. Matt Gaetz is demanding answers from, who do you send this to? Attorney General Merrick Garland demanding information on the Office of Special Counsel Jack Smith, revealing that one of the prosecutors on his team that investigated Trump for his alleged mishandling of the documents previously contributed to President Biden's 2020 campaign and faced misconduct allegations in 2009. Gaetz is demanding that the names of all people working on the case in Smith's office be made public. The congressman claimed in his letter that Smith's past work is both highly irregular and of extraordinary public concern, specifically how his office is structured, and has given Garland until July the 7th to cough up, quote, all staff rosters, phone lists, or similar records within the custody or control of the Department of Justice, depicting all employees hired by or detailed to the Office of Special Counsel Jack Smith. Jack Smith is, to the left, is becoming a superstar with online stores full of Jack Smith gear. Maybe we'll talk about that, but I did not mean to spend the whole program on this. So let's take a short break. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. And we are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox. Michael Goodwin has a really interesting piece at the New York Post, about this. Millions are losing faith in our system over Trump-Biden divide. Can't vote our way out of this injustice. And the whole crux of the article, we don't have time to go through all of it, but he had a friend who kept saying the phrase, we are not voting our way out of this. This, of course, is a reference to the great divide that's tearing America apart, like I just mentioned before. And Exhibit A is a Democrat president's willingness to use the Department of Justice as a weapon against his leading Republican rival. And I'd like to highlight Michael Goodwin, as far as I'm aware, at least the New York Post in general, not huge fans of Trump. I'm not saying they're out to get him, but it's not as if this is going to be a glowing piece all about Trump. There are many good reasons why no former president has ever faced criminal charges. And it's not because they behaved as angels for the rest of their lives, starting the minute they left office. It's because previous generations understood there had to be limits to the use of government power, or the country would tear itself to pieces every time the president changed hands. And this is what we've been talking about on the program. This has been something I've been saying. That's what scares me about this, the divide, tearing us apart, what it shows our enemies. But the far left wing has been taking over the Democrat Party. And they always know best and believe it can cancel its opponents by shutting them up, or in this case, locking them up. And we've seen that trend a lot more, this kind of woke culture, but in general, they know better. So never mind what the past generations did. Never mind what past history looked like. We know now. We're the most aggrieved now. We're the most upset now. So our emotions matter more than any other generations. Our feelings matter more than any other generations. As always with them, this time is different because they are morally superior people. And that's such a good point by Michael Goodwin as just the mindset in general of those really in today's culture. Now, the faith in our foundations is what scares me. And if you look at this, it's in sharp decline. And polls consistently show that clear public majorities, upwards of 75% in some cases, believe the country is on the wrong track and failing to deliver on our bedrock promises. This all ties in together, and it's just leading to more divide and more of this anger and this chasm between the sides. So there you go. I can't, like I said, I'm not going to read the whole article, but it's a very, very good piece by Michael Goodwin. An increasingly important development to many Americans is the realization that the FBI has known all of this all along, and he was referencing, see, I'm trying to rush here, and I hate when I do that, but with the questions about Biden and the bribery and Hunter, now day by day, drip by drip, more voters are getting wise to the Biden grift. Perhaps Donald Trump does deserve to be prosecuted for taking and withholding classified documents. But unless the nation sees Biden being held to the same standards by the same prosecutors and courts, the great divide will grow deeper, wider, and more dangerous. Coming from the New York Post. And again, when you see, which I think is only harmful, when you see Hillary Clinton laughing about it as if she got away with something, I don't know. It does not paint a pretty picture. Let's take one more short break. One of two more short breaks, and then we'll be back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We're broadcasting from the Hesselson studio. Just to give you a look in the mindset of the media. The media see this court case, if you saw the wall-to-wall coverage, it's not just about Trump and the rule of law and the things they talk about, but it's about them. Many people are taught in journalism school that, Woodward Bernstein, if you can bring down a sitting president, specifically a Republican, boy, that's it, that you're a superstar, you're a hero. So they're looking at this as their opportunity to go after a former Republican president and highlight the job that they do, right? So in this case, CNN wrote a 3-page article by Oliver Darcy at CNN, how CNN broke the news from Trump's arraignment, despite a courtroom ban on electronics. Now, what is the breaking news? Did anybody think the former president was going to go in there and plead guilty? I guess I'm confused by what exactly they broke. It goes through in how they hired high school kids to sit in the court and then scribble down notes, and then they had to call a payphone, but from the payphone could only make local calls. And then they start to attack basically the judicial system. I think this is long overdue, said Eli Honig, describing the federal courts as stubbornly old-fashioned and up on their high horse. There is this pearl clutching going on for decades among judges. We don't want our proceedings here to become a spectacle. Well, guess what? We need to see this. To put it not so finely, we have a right to see this. Very, 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 very full of themselves. But they're making, many in the news, making this case about them. And I think that's why I see a piece today. And that's why you tune in here, because you're not getting that here. You're only getting the facts here. But that's why I think that you see these polls that are showing that influencers on social media are actually overtaking journalists as news sources, especially for younger people. And you see the loss of trust in places like CNN and elsewhere. Well, it's been long overdue. So that's why you tune in here every weekday morning starting at 7. This is where you get all the facts and all the news. But we'll take another short break. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. All right, let's read some viewer comments before we wrap up here on Frankly Speaking. All right, and thank you to everybody who reached out, as always. Okay, first, and I didn't have time to put it up on the screen, I apologize. Those that don't mind the two-tier justice system don't realize that in the end, they will also be a part of the persecution. By the time they realize it, it is already too late. Thank you. Another comment, if Trump was a threat to national security, what would you call it with Biden's open door for migrants? Thank you. And the last one here's a little lengthy, but I really appreciate it. A few thoughts I had. People are amazed that Mr. Trump pleaded not guilty. Yeah, I know. If he didn't, the trial would be over. How secret or classified are these documents? Great question. The media showed pictures of various documents all over the floor. Couldn't this have been a photo op for the Justice Department? Yeah, it definitely looks that way, doesn't it? What prison could they house a former president and protect national security? Great point. And I had this conversation with somebody the other day. Does that mean the Secret Service, who signed up for that job, would have to spend their working hours in prison in the same cell? I mean, there's a lot of questions there with Secret Service. But yeah, how do you protect national security with a former president in prison? When will the Justice Department start separate investigations into whether or not former and current politicians did the same? Yeah, because for a while there, it seemed like everybody and their brother had classified documents. I think we were all starting to wonder if we had classified documents. I do want to commend that you continue to avoid bias in your coverage of all news stories. Oh, thank you very much. That's very kind of you. So thank you to everybody who reached out. But you raised a lot of good questions. I think just a visual of that, too, of having a former president in a prison, whatever prison that may be, with Secret Service there, I don't know. It seems like nothing's off limits to divide the country even more. Whatever you think about this case, the divide is not going to get better. But I want to wrap up on a couple quick things, and we're going to go fast here. Joe Manchin, he vows to fight Biden's war on appliances. Good. Not supporting any of the craziness. Of course, Joe Manchin is a Democrat, but he happens to be a thorn in the side of many Democrats that don't always seem the happiest with him. But he says, you cannot eliminate your way to a cleaner environment. It's not going to work. It's not feasible. It won't be done. The rest of the world won't follow. And Asia is going to produce about 90% of all pollution in the next 10 years. It's where all the pollution is coming from. Innovation is the only way to go. Yes, if you want a clean environment, then you have to do it through technology and innovation, right? And the technology and innovation is not there. Look at it, especially in New York State, where we've heard what it would do to the grid. By the way, Assembly in New York State, speaking of New York State, plans 2 days of legislative work next week to get some of the last deals in that they couldn't get before, I guess. Assembly lawmakers and staffers have been told to prepare for 2 days of legislative work beginning June 20th. The State Assembly is returning for a 2-day stint of voting on unfinished business. Many of the bills being considered are local level concerns for lawmakers. Speaking of that, Assemblyman Phil Palmisano is going to be our guest this Friday, so make sure you tune in for that. And then next Friday, we're going to have Assemblyman Chris Friend. So we're going to be busy. And we have, obviously, a lot of guests throughout the week, so you just have to stay tuned. A really good piece by the Times Union editorial board. Don't have time for it, but state lawmakers fuel cynicism once again, and that's how they made the changes to the campaign finance, quote-unquote, reforms. That is something we'll be talking about with Assemblyman Phil Palmisano on Friday in depth. Well, thank you to everybody who joined us. Thank you to Maggie Hall from Big Fox News at 10 for being our guest, letting us find out a little bit more about the great product that they offer. And they do a really good job at Big Fox News at 10, so I hope that you'll tune in. Well, join us tomorrow. We'll be back with Frankly Speaking, starting at 7 a.m. I look forward to it already. Have a great day, everyone. Hi, I'm Frank Acom. Thanks for checking out our YouTube page. We'll be uploading each edition of Frankly Speaking 1 week after the original air date. So, let me remind you to watch the live version of Frankly Speaking, weekday mornings starting at 7, only on WYDC TV, Big Fox.